Hi y'all, since my video last week on turning a wooden elf, I discovered a new version of that that I'm going to talk about today. And I also want to share with you some of the wonderful tips and suggestions I received from you viewers on this project, as well as sharing a few more tips that I picked up along the way as I turned a few more and got some lessons learned. We started with a very helpful comment from viewer Jonathan Ash, who said, "Hi ho, Mike. Your wood elf makes me think of a Nordic Gnome. Take a look." Well, I did. I'd never heard of a Nordic Gnome. And that led me down to a term that I'd never thought about when I was doing my research, and that's gnome. I discovered that a Gnome, or Nordic Gnome, is a mythological creature from Scandinavian folklore, today typically associated with the winter solstice and the Christmas season. It's a solitary, mischievous, domestic sprite responsible for the protection and welfare of the farmstead and its buildings. Wow, I missed that term gnome in my initial research. So when I went back and started doing some research, I ran across this wonderful video that I have in the show notes by Nick, always enthusiastic, entertaining Nick Zametti, who turned one that I liked a little better. It's a pretty much a one-piece ornament, except for the nose, but it's more of a Christmas ornament, which I like. I did some further research and I found one very similar to Nick's, and that's from Rebecca DeGroot. It has a different contrasting wooden top, and the body and the head are different colors, but they're very similar in that they're Christmas tree ornaments, and I like both designs better than the one I showed you last week. Okay, let's talk briefly about fur. Trevor Miller says, "I prefer just making a beard instead of having a full body of fuzz. I also make them a bit better fed, large bellies. One tip for the budget conscious: I find it much cheaper to buy a faux fur pet bed at $15 and cut it up rather than buying faux fur fabric. Be a bit expensive at $40 to $80 per square." Yeah, I agree, Trevor. I'm finding it a lot cheaper here. I guess it all depends on what your fur shopping choices are, but it's good to have options. My wife picked up this yard of brown fur for about $20 at Hobby Lobby. I picked up this quarter of a yard, which is probably a lifetime supply. All I need, a white fur, for less than $4 a yard at Hobby Lobby. So I've also got a link in my Amazon shop and show notes to source these if you can't get them locally. Several of you commented on what I think is the most troublesome part of this whole project, and that's cutting the faux fur and cutting a whole lot for the nose. Blasting Company says, "Thanks for the inspiration, Mike. I drill a hole in soft material like this fur or leather or any other fabric. I tend to clamp it firmly between two pieces of scrap wood and I drill through. That holds properly the piece, and as it is held on the entrance and on the exit, I get a quite nice round hole, nice round edge to my hole." So I appreciate that tip, Blasting Company. Dave Johnson says he thought he'd give this project a go. Maybe a small hole punch would work for the nose. I only have a hole punch for paper, and it's too large, and it wasn't strong enough to punch a hole through here. But comment from viewer Dave Tutton says he's going to try a leather punch for the hole for the nose, so that's a great option if you've got one. Daniel Y suggested that the best technique for cutting the hole for the nose, of any of them, I think. For the hole in the fur, you can also hold the hair in half, fur side in, and use the tip of your scissors to make two nicks, like an X shape. The biggest tip that I would have is don't use your shop scissors. They don't cut worth a darn. Go borrow your wife's scissors. So certainly one of the things I've learned is the beard shaped in a little V I think is more effective, certainly easier than the full body wrap that I did in last week's video. I find when you cut these on the outside, you don't want to cut too much of the fur off on the side, so that tends to work fairly well with a razor knife, just lightly slicing through it, and that'll prevent you from cutting the actual fur itself. Then you want to keep in mind where the direction of the fur is, and have that going down, of course. And I find that V shape, I think, works the very, very best like this. And again, cut that V shape. Sometimes that helps me to kind of put a little dot in the middle of the V to know where to cut to. And then I just slice, gently slice through it with a razor knife or a craft knife. Of all the suggestions for cutting the little hole for the nose, I think the best one is for Daniel Y, and I appreciate that, Daniel, is just folding it over and cutting a tiny little notch with a sharp pair of scissors, and that works extremely well. Just like that. Regarding the gnome with a bent hat, I've already sent it off to be sold. Thomas Russell writes, I'm left wondering, however, how many will view this video and still wonder how you did the bent hat. Let me proffer one possible solution. Use some sort of saw and cut the hat at half the angle at which you want the final bend to be. Turn the upper piece of the hat 180 degrees and glue it back on with CA glue. Use accelerator if you have it. Sand if there are any evident residues. Then finish, paint the wood, and let dry as you like before attaching the faux fur. That's exactly right, and that's faster than I could have shown you in a video. Okay, now for some additional tips and lessons learned. I've gone to turning a smaller knob on this thing. I find a 1/4 inch is okay, but I'm going to drop it down to 3/16. I think it makes it a little easier to make a smaller hole in the fur, and maybe a bit easier to drill that hole from a starter hole with an awl. At least that's my thinking. So I happen to have these little Craftsman wrenches I inherited from my father-in-law, so I think that's the key, is using some type of caliper way to get them close. On to the next one. Okay, I've turned a couple of noses and the top for contrasting knob, and I'm ready to go on to turn a couple more gnomes, so I'm just going to take this off. It's still got wood on it. I'm just going to leave that in there for the next step. It's hard to stress enough the importance of, when you're repeating things, you have a storyboard that makes it very easy to mark the features and to measure them. Here's the bottom. I know I can just do a part right there, and I know this is 35 millimeters, so I can bring it down to here, part down to here to just below 35, and get that shape just right. Let me show you another tip. I'm not sure I've ever showed this before, but I made a bunch of wooden, I guess you call them feeler gauges out of hardwood. They're different sizes. They go from 1/8 of an inch, 3/16, 3/8, 7/16, 1/4, 1 1/4, 5/8, a half. And for something like this project, where I want to be consistent in marking where the nose is, it makes it very easy. I'm going to pick the feeler gauge that says 3/16 of an inch, and then I can just put a little pencil mark there, and they'll all be the same. So when you're doing production work, it makes it a lot easier. I keep these right here on my lathe. And I want to show you this little trick for this tool. This is a plumber's reamer. It's got all these sharp edges on it, and every now and then when I caliper something, it's off just a little bit. This is a 3/16 inch hole, and the nose is just a hair too big. I can take this plumber's reamer and just kind of work it a little bit, and I can get a perfect fit. And this is so handy on everything from coffee scoops, and anytime where you're joining parts, birdhouse perches. This is a 5/8 inch. You can get them a half, but I prefer the 5/8 inch. I've got these on my Amazon, in my Amazon shop, with a link below. Okay, for this particular model where I part off the bottom, sometimes it's a little rough on softer woods, but it's easy enough to use this sander, and I've got a video on making this. You can check it out. And it's variable speed. are. If you're going to add a little ball to the top of a contrasting color, I like, instead of using a screw eye, I like to drill a side hole for the cord I'm going to use. It's a 1/16 of an inch, so I find it easier to drill it on the lathe. So I do a starter hole, come back with a 1/16 inch drill bit. That way if I get any blowout, I can take care of it easily. In this case I had a tiny little bit, and I'll just polish that up a little bit. Which do you like best? A screw eye with a cord through it, or a hole drill through it? Both good options. You know, we've all probably taken a ball of cord and put it in something and to pull the cord out, and then I've done that for years, and then all of a sudden, as working on this project, it dawned on me I could do the same thing with this roll of cord by just putting it in an envelope and snipping the corner off, so it makes it a lot handier to use. If you missed last week's video on turning a wooden elf, I have a link right here. You might want to check that out. Also, check out my Amazon shop that's in the show notes. Full disclosure, if you buy anything, I'll get a small commission. Y'all stay safe. Come on back here.